There's a funny thing here that makes, when it comes to alcoholism, that doesn't make much sense, but it is so true that it is almost our universal experience. That the more I try to manage my own life, the more I try to wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world, the worse I get. And let's face it, I don't think there's a group of people on the planet that have ever spent more money, more time, more obsessive energy on trying to make ourselves happy as we have, and the end result is we wished we were dead. I don't think anyone's has ever worried about themselves more than we have. It is a way of life, the self-involvement and the self-concern. And the more I do that, it like deteriorates my life. The worse my life gets. And I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything in me, as I want to tell my sponsor, I really need to spend more time working on me. He says, no, you don't. That's what got you here. And he says, step away from your life. Get back away from your life, please. It's dangerous. It's not fit for human habitation. Back away from your life. Go over here, make those amends, start paying those people back, help God's kids, sponsor people, but step away from your life. And let's see what happens when you do that. And I go here and I help God's kids. And marvelous things happen over here. In my absence. In the absence of my attention. Which is really a blow to my ego, thinking that how wonderful I am. But look how good a job I did with my life when it was really hands-on. And I'm not talking about just drunk. I'm talking, there are periods in my sobriety where I had a lot of hands-on my life, and the stuff that happened to me, and the disaster, and the anxiety, and it was just, it's crap. I turned my life to crap. More and more we become interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. I guess rather than take from it. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of His presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood Him. If you want to say this along with me, please feel free. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Then it says, we thought well before taking this step. Oops, too late. Sorry. Hold on. I took step 3 in early sobriety, and I'll tell you something, I didn't really know what I was doing. I tell you, if I knew what was going to happen to me, I'd have never said that goddamn prayer. I'm telling you. I thought I knew because I think I know stuff, right? I thought I knew what I was getting into. I didn't have a clue. I said that prayer. I got down on my knees with another member of AA, said that prayer. And the next year of my life was probably the most chaotic year I've ever had any time. I'm living in this little apartment with a roommate, and I'm just struggling to pay my half of the rent, living paycheck to paycheck. My roommate moves out. Now I'm terrified. Then I lose my job. And I cannot get another job in that venue. I lost that job working in that rehab for those teenagers. I put resumes in every helping place in town. I could not get another job. Every door was closed. I was dating a gal who dumped me for a guy that had more going on for him. Which there was a depressing kind of rightness about that, I'll tell you. I started having these crazy emotional upheavals. Like I'd be sitting with a cup of coffee watching some movie or something on TV. Nothing, not an emotional movie. And just start sobbing. And it was like emotions that had been pent up in me for decades were just kind of boiling out. And they had no rhyme or reason. They didn't make any sense. They weren't connected to any reality in my life. And I felt like my life is just crumbling around me. I have visions of homelessness, emotional incapacitation. I'm starting to get bouts of depression again. Everything's just awful. And I go to my sponsor and I tell him what's going on. He says, "Oh, you're right on track. Don't worry about it." Right on track for what? A train wreck? I mean, what are you talking about? Right on track. And see, when I said that third step prayer, I don't know what I'm saying here. And God took this more serious than I did. When I asked my Father, here, I want you to start building with me and start doing with me, He got to work. And just like a burnout, abandoned building that you wanted to rehab, you'd have to tear out a lot of crap to make room for new stuff. And God started tearing out stuff out of my life, and He never asked my permission. And He never gave me the diagrams and the blueprints. He just started changing stuff, and it was frightening. I felt like my life was out of control. I was scared to death. And the old timers would just keep telling me, just keep hanging in there. And I'd go crazy. I'd say, "Man, but by the end of the month I'm going to be homeless." And he said, "Are you homeless right now?" "Well, no." "But by next week," he said, "But this second, this moment, right now, this second, is everything all right?" "Well, yeah, but by next week." "No, we're not talking about next week. Right this moment, is everything all right?" "Well, yeah, but by next month." No, right now." "Well, yeah." Hang on there. Stay there. Stay right now. That's where God is. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find Him now. God's in your life right now. You're okay right now. When it ain't okay right now, we will have something to deal with. But as long as it's okay right now, let's not worry about it. And the truth was, that moment, it really was okay. Even though in the control center, every screen, all the red lights are flashing. I know the Klingons are on their way. I mean, it's awful. But the truth was right now, and it never got bad. See, and the problem is God never gave me a game plan. If God would have said to me, if He would have said, "Bob," He said, "we got to get you out of that job. Because, Bob, you're working as a paid counselor. You're working, if you were to statistically, if of all the jobs an alcoholic could take, it is the highest relapse rate, and we don't think you're cut out for that. We're going to have to get you out of that job, Bob, because I think you'd have a better chance of staying sober as a drug dealer than as an alcoholism counselor. And we're going to get you over here in this little petty-ass job over here that's going to eventually end up in you owning that corporation. And you'll be able to retire as a young man, and you'll be wealthy and financially set for life. Would that be okay for you, Bob?" Well, sure, God. Now that you put it that way, I just thought I lost a job. I didn't know. You know that girl you're dating, Bob? She's going to drink eventually, and the guy she's with at that time's going to drink with her. We don't want you to be that guy. We're going to pull you out of there. Would that be okay for you, Bob? Well, yeah, okay. You put it that way. That roommate that's leaving, now you think you're not going to be able to pay your rent? There's a guy moving to town with a couple years of sobriety from Florida, and he's going to need to find a roommate. And you and him are going to do a lot of 12-step work together, Bob. And he's going to take your program to a new level. Would that be okay for you, Bob? But God never said none of that. He just started building with me and doing with me, and I was scared to death. And thank God for the old-timers that believed in God's hand more than I did. I didn't really believe. Wasn't trusting Him. I was in a panic. They just kept telling me, "Hang in there. Don't quit 2 minutes before the miracle. It's going to be all right. Stay right now. Go to the next meeting. Do the next right thing. Keep your head where your ass is. Right here, right now. Right now. And in time, I came to realize that absolutely everything that was removed from me was removed for a purpose. To make room for something better. Something that was better, that was ultimately to make me more useful. I was over 10 years sober before I really understood this prayer. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that. I started saying this prayer in early sobriety, and I say it every morning. I still say it. I don't know how you could be 10 years sober and say a prayer 365 days a year for 10 years and not know what you're saying, but that's the truth. I didn't know what I was saying. And I'm over 10 years sober, and I'm taking a guy I sponsor. We're doing a third step. And we're going through this part of the book. And we get to the third step prayer, and I ask him, I said, what does this mean to you? This thing we're about to do. What do you think you're saying here in this prayer? And the guy said to me, he said, when I say, God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and do with me as Thou will, I guess what I'm really saying is I'm making a decision here. From this moment on, I'm going to try to make my life none of my business. It's now God's business to build with me and do with me. He said, do you think that's right? And I said, man, I think that's right. I think that's right on the money. And then he said something that I've always believed, that he heard me say in a meeting one time, that I'm asking God to relieve me of the bondage of self so that I can better do Thy will. Because I can't make my life none of my business effectively because I'm so self-concerned. I love the word bondage. It's like I'm shackled to my own self-involvement. I'm a hostage of my own self-interest and self-concern. So I'm asking God to relieve me of the bondage of self, because God's got to do something here, or else how am I ever going to carry out this decision in step 3? So I'm asking Him to do that. And then the last line is where he blew my mind. And I've been saying this prayer for years. And it says, take away my difficulties. Now I got that part. Yes, God, take away my... And I got a list too, I'm telling you. But it doesn't say that. It says, take away my difficulties so that victory over them would bear witness to those I would help. Of Thy power, Thy love, Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. What I'm really... And the guy says to me, he says, so we're going to make our life none of our business. I'm asking God to relieve me of the bondage of self so I can do that. And if He will do that, if He will take away this difficulty with the bondage of self, He'll do it for one reason and one reason only. So that I can help other people. And he said that, he said, so the whole purpose of this is just so we can help other people, isn't it? And I was over 10 years sober, I didn't get that. And I sat there and I felt like an idiot. I tried to look like I knew that. Oh yeah, I know that. I didn't know that. I'm over 10 years sober. I still think it's about me. I still think it's about I'm thinking, take away my difficulties. I thought we were talking about personal problems, right? So I'll be happy. So I'll be more useful. Take away these difficulties for one reason and one reason only. So that victory over them would bear witness to those. And notice it says, I would help. Like, it's what they're really saying is, get ready because you better help some people. That I would help. Of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. This is a contract. This is the formal terms of surrender. That I'm doing my part and God's doing His part. And from step 3 all the way on the rest of the steps, there's my part and there's God's part. And my part here is to try to step away from my life with His help. And help His kids. And His part is to relieve me of the bondage of self. Something I can't think my way out of. I can't wish it away. I have to have His help. Well, let's start on step 4 a little bit. The bottom of page 63. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of of the program of recovery. And I tell you, I know guys that do step workshops that leave out, to me, what is the most important part of this whole process. The thing that's changed my life the most. And I'm going to try to go through this meticulously, step by step, everything it says in the book. And I think if you find that if you actually take everything in this part of the book and actually do it, like, don't assume that they're just saying that for the hell of it. Actually do everything it says in here. You will find an amazing thing will happen to you. There is nothing I've done in my sobriety that has changed me more than step 4. And yet I had a tremendous resistance to doing this. It's uncanny, and it seems to be a quite common experience in Alcoholics Anonymous that we have this natural resistance wells up within us to doing the thing that is going to ultimately lead to our happiness and more usefulness. It's I often suspect, it almost seems to me on some weird level that this alcoholism thing has its own survival instincts. And it doesn't want me to get well. Because I noticed that. I noticed when it came time to do an inventory, I would wash my car rather than write. I would do anything. I would go to twice as many meetings thinking, well, this is good, because I really don't want to write. It's just that avoidance stuff. And I don't know what I'm afraid I'm going to find. I think I'm going to... I suspect, as my fear was, is that I was going to find that I was right. And I would actually see it on paper. And that I was right about me. And what I thought about me is I thought I was a useless, worthless piece of crap. And I was going to find out. And I'll tell you what I found out was the complete opposite. That all the things that were objectionable in me, in my life, weren't me. They were the things that were part of my alcoholism that drove me. And if you clear away everything that's not you, you find you. It's like Michelangelo's story of the statue David. He was asked how he made this incredible piece of art that has become one of the great art treasures of the world. And he said it was easy. I took a block of stone and I just cut away everything that wasn't David. And that's what we're going to start doing in Alcoholics Anonymous in step 4, is we start to cut away everything that was horrible, but it wasn't you anyway. It was your defense mechanisms. It was this illusions you functioned under, these self-centered fears to protect yourself from life, and how you stepped on people's toes and all the people you hurt as a result of it. We're going to cut all of that stuff away, and you're going to clean up the mess. And we're going to find you. We're going to introduce you to somebody you're going to really like, and it's going to be you. I never thought that. I thought I was going to be introduced to someone I couldn't stand. That was my great fear. My great fear is I would be right about me. I would find out that I really was the piece of crap I suspected I was. And I found out, to my delight, the absolute opposite. And it's not that I'm perfect, nobody here is. But underneath all the defects of character, there's a really wonderful person. There's a child of God. Bottom of page 63, it says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. I think for some of us is like 2 years. We got some kind of reverse dog years thing going on in here. When later on it says at once, and at once means let's take a while. We get this weird thing. I don't know what that's about. Next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us never attempted, though our decision, in step 3, though our decision was a vital, life-giving, vital, and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. This is why for my first several years of sobriety, I'm the guy that's turning it over and taking it back and turning it over and taking it back and turning it over and taking it back. The problem is I'm not turning it over. I can't turn it over. I'm blocked. I am blocked. And I don't even know what I'm blocked for. But I'm trying to turn, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to give my life to God But I haven't dismantled my will, this judgment machine where I play God. And that's what we're about to do, and especially in resentments. Resentments is the most, and the resentment part of the inventory is when I face something I never suspected, the exact nature of my wrongs. And it wasn't the people I'd robbed and things. I mean, that stuff's all on my fear list. The real wrongs is how wrong I'd been in my judgment of all the people I'd resented. As I go through this process, I will get to see how wrong I had been about my parents, because I will look at them now from an other-centered point of view rather than a self-centered point of view. This process is designed to give me an incredible change in perception and consciousness. And I missed it the first time around. When I was about a year sober, I did my first 4-step, and I asked my sponsor what to do, and he said, well, read the big book in chapter 5 and then go to 12 by 12 study groups. And I read chapter 5 and I get to the columns on page 65 and I'm looking at these and I don't get it. I don't know who the hell Mr. Brown is and Mrs. Jones. I don't know what they're doing. So I go to these 12 by 12 study groups, and what I thought was right was you just write your life story. Everything you're ashamed of, all your secrets, and I put all that stuff down. It's about almost 40 pages. I took my 5th step, and nothing changed. I still had the same problems in relationships, in employment. I still was prone to anxiety and depression. I was still the judgmental guy that was in danger of leaving Alcoholics Anonymous by one judgment at a time. I was still the same guy. Nothing had changed. When I was between 4 and 5 years sober, I came back and did this process, and my life changed so dramatically. It's unbelievable. And here's what I did. I started to look in 3 areas of my life: resentments, fear, and sex conduct. And ultimately, those 3 areas touch upon all the calamity, all the pomp from the judgments in my resentments, all the worship of other things, the things I'm obsessed with, to clear away this channel between me and God, and ultimately between me and you. Because I'm not just blocked from carrying out the decision in step 3, I'm also blocked from God, and I'm blocked from you. Alcoholics of my type with untreated alcoholism live in a peculiar state of separation, surrounded by people who care about me, but I have a seeming inability to connect with them the way they seem to so easily connect with each other. It's almost as if I live my life with a feeling of it's all of you and then there's me, separate. As if there was some sort of invisible yet impenetrable barrier between me and you that made it almost impossible for me to connect and integrate myself intimately with you the way you seem to be able to connect with each other. And so I always felt like I'm the guy, even sober, that's coming from behind. Always the guy that doesn't quite fit, because I'm blocked. I'm blocked from God, I'm blocked from you, and I'm blocked from a desperate need to carry out a decision that if I don't carry it out, I will destroy myself sober. And so I started looking for the things that had blocking me, to uncover, discover, and ultimately in step 7, discard the things that were blocking me from God, from you, and from carrying out this decision. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about stock and trade. When I did my first inventory and I wrote my life story, I didn't find any facts and face any facts about me I didn't know. Everything on there I knew. I mean, there were some things you didn't know, but there was no new information there. There was no discovering truth. It was old hat, all of it. I was there. I did that stuff. I wrote about the guy I stabbed, and I wrote about the money I stole, and I wrote about all the sleazy sex stuff I did, and all the things I was ashamed of and felt guilty for. And I came out the end and nothing had changed. But it changed when I did this. changed so dramatically, my life's never been the same. As a matter of fact, I've had a universal experience with guys I sponsor that do this process. If you do this exactly the way it is in the book, for the rest of your life, you'll be able to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and listen to people share, and you'll be able to tell in short order the ones that have done this and the ones that haven't. Because you'll never be the same when you do this. And for nothing else, you will never, ever, ever be able to sell yourself the bill of goods again that you're a victim. You'll never be able to sell yourself that bill of goods again. You will never, ever be able to blame anybody except yourself for anything in your life that's bad. You will always know the truth. You will always know that you were the guy that did it, and you will have the consciousness to know how you did it. You will know the truth. So it's to discover the truth about stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of a business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. I fool myself about values. I'm delusional. I imagine things are a certain way and people are a certain way, and they're not that way at all. I've had bosses that I built cases against that they were out to get me and they didn't like me. It wasn't about that at all. I didn't do my job. Right? But it's personal. It's not personal. You didn't do your job. But I can't see it from their perspective. When I could put myself in their shoes, I'd have fired me too. Right? But self-centered people never look at their life like that. And this is called a paradigm. I used to do these business seminars for companies that were in trouble. Years ago, I did a half dozen of them, and they were very effective. And one of the things nobody ever knew I did this, but I took the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and applied it to the spirit. Just as the alcoholic spirit gets sick, a spirit of a company gets sick. And often companies are plagued by, they have a dynamic that goes on, it's called a paradigm. And it's the same thing that we do with our lives. And what happens is they have a problem in a certain area that they don't want to believe is a problem. Because it can't be a problem. So they imagine that it's all these other areas, and they spend huge amounts of money and energy fixing other areas, and the problem's over here, and they're ignoring that. And the more energy and money they put into the problem, the worse it gets. And it's every effort they make to fix themselves makes them worse. And there are businesses that actually go out of business into bankruptcy on paradigms. And they don't know what's going on. They don't have a clue, because it might be something over here that they just don't want to believe is the problem. And so we cannot fool ourselves about values. And I have to look at my life completely different than I've ever looked at it before. Completely different. He said we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. And the first list I will make is resentments. I wouldn't have thought resentment should have been the number one offender. I would have thought guilt. When I first got sober, I was plagued with guilt. And a lot of my resentments, I don't even know they're resentments. I just think those people really are assholes. Right? I don't think that's a problem. I kind of liked feeling smugly superior to them. You know what I mean? Right? I don't think that's a problem. But guilt was a big deal. But I'll tell you why resentment's the number one offender and it's not guilt. As a matter of fact, there's not even a section in the inventory for guilt. Even though guilt doesn't come up, everything I ever felt guilty about comes up on my fear inventory, because it always involves a fear of people finding out, or always a disclosure. There's always a fear involved in every type of guilt. Fear of consequences or retribution or karma or something. But resentment really is the number one offender, because there's a funny thing that happens with guilt. When I was in my early teens, as a budding young alcoholic, I was a really bad juvenile delinquent. And I was driven by this need to be approved by older kids and accepted, and the need to look tough and all that stuff. And as a result of being driven by all those fears, I did a lot of stuff that I felt tremendously guilty for. And I lived a life of spree and remorse, and it was self-will spree. It wasn't always alcohol, wasn't always involved. Sometimes I would steal stuff I would shoplift because I wanted the approval of the gang I was hanging around with, and I would do that kind of stuff. And I would always be plagued with guilt, tremendous guilt. But a funny thing about guilt is one of two things happen. Either the guilt will drive you to address the thing you feel guilty for, and you eventually make it right, and then you're no longer guilty. Or something else happens. If you can stay uncaught long enough, and you get to a place where you know beyond a shadow of a doubt you're home free, there's not going to be any consequences, you're out of the woods now, you're no longer guilty. And I have stuff that I did in my early teens that I felt hugely guilty for, and some of that stuff I don't even think I can remember it. I can't remember it. But I had stuff that people did to me when I was a little kid that I got a resentment, and I kept that on file. Not only could I remember it, I polished up the case on it, and I would just manicure it and just build it and add stuff to it over the years. I just enhanced it. It was so clear to me. Now, it might not be in reality, but I kept those cases well maintained. But once I got free of the guilt, I was free of the guilt. So guilt is temporary. Resentments are forever. Forever. When I did, in my early 20s, I could remember things that happened to me when I was 4 years old that I never forgot, cases I built on family members and people in my neighborhood. I could remember them clearly. So resentment is the number one offender. I didn't know what resentment was. I thought it was anger. Because it looks a little bit like anger, but resentment is really not anger. Resentment comes from a Latin word, resentire, meaning to resensitize, to refeel, or to replay. And the difference between anger and resentment is if I'm out in the garage and I'm building a birdhouse for the backyard, and I'm hammering nails into wood, and I miss and I hit my thumb with the hammer, I will get angry. I might throw that hammer across that garage and MF that hammer. That's anger. If I get a resentment, 2 months later, I'm still figuring out how I'm going to get even with that damn hammer. You know what I mean? I'm replaying the hurt, and every time I replay it, I build it up. You watch that football games where they do the instant replay? Well, that's what a resentment is. It's a replay of what had happened, except that I do it with the mind of a chronic alcoholic. And I just don't replay it what actually happened. I zoom in on what they did and blow it up a little more. And the part that I contributed to it, I kind of phase it out into the shade over here until it's not really there anymore and focus on what they did. And then I got this Howard Cosell kind of commentator that says things like, and after all you've done for them. And there you were, as I pushed what I did out of the picture, and there you were, minding your own business. So resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Maybe more than alcohol. Maybe more than alcohol. I watch people drink again. Invariably it starts with a resentment. I got a guy I sponsor right now. He's been a chronic slipper for 20 years. And he finally came into AA and he worked the steps. And he went up. He did pretty good up through step 5. And then he started messing around with not serious about 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And did a few amends. And he hasn't been doing 10, 11, or 12. And he's become the unsponsorable guy. And you can have that's how you can have the greatest sponsor in the world. It's meaningless if you're unsponsorable. Remember that the burden of the lesson is always on the student. It is never on the teacher. And he's become unsponsorable. He's become the great I am. And he's leaving out. He quit our home group. Still going to some meetings. But he quit our home group because he's noticed at great depth how he's not appreciated there. So he's punishing us. It's the second or third time he's done this. And the other 2 times I would talk him down and I would help him adjust his attitude and get back in. He'd do it reluctantly because I'm his sponsor. And this time he's arguing with me. He wants to be right about the idiots in our home group, right? And I even had him read the last sentence in the first paragraph in Working with Others. And if you ever have problems with people in AA, read the last sentence in the first paragraph in Working with Others. It's in italics. Go ahead, look at it. If you want to look at it now, the ones that will look at it will start laughing. It says in italics, remember they are very ill. Let's never forget that this is the world's largest outpatient clinic. I mean, if I expect people in Alcoholics Anonymous to be anything other than what they are, I am the guy that's the idiot here. And on a good day, I'm a good example of AA. On a bad day, just let me stay, please. Just don't kick me out. So he's judged himself right out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's probably going to die. He still goes to a few meetings, but he only goes to meetings at one of the clubs where they like him to share a lot. Where he's the most sobriety, one of the most sobrieties in the room, with less than 2 years. I hope he survives it. I told him, I said, I'm not going to talk you out of this one. You're so adamant about being right about these people and your judgments. I said, maybe I have a feeling you will learn more from me not talking you out of this than if you survive it. You will learn more than you will ever learn if I talk you out of it. And I just pray for him. He is hell-bent on his course of action. And maybe he'll survive. I hope so. It says, from resentment stem all form of spiritual disease. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. We all know that. We all know what it feels like to be sick of heart. We all know what it feels like to be lost and consumed with ourselves. I drank liquor because at one time in my life, no matter how sick of heart I was, 5 shots of Jose Cuervo would vitalize my spirit. It was great medicine at one time. It wasn't in the last few years, but at one time. And I must find a way to vitalize or awaken my spirit. The real soul promise, the most important promise of all the 12 steps, and there's many, many promises in here. Almost every action step has promises. But I think the most important promise is in step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the single result of these steps. The promise is that something's going to awaken within me. And isn't that really what happened when I drank? Do you remember walking into a bar, being more dead than alive, and have 5 shots of whiskey and you just come alive? You would awaken. You would become a part of. And Alcoholics Anonymous had better do that for me. Or I'm just going to do time here until I eventually drink or medicate myself, because I can't stay sick of spirit for long, sustained periods of time. It just wears on me. The book says when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of doctors today. Andrew Weil, I think as they pronounce it, is one of the leading proponents of that. Guys who are starting to look at the human beings as whole beings, that a lot of our diseases are spiritually based. That migraine headaches and ulcers and spastic colitis and even tumors, sometimes we build them around resentments and fears. That we get sick of spirit first, and then it makes us crazy, and we just live up in our heads, and our body starts to follow along behind. I'll tell you a tragic story. I watched the reverse of that. I sponsored a guy for 14 and a half years who was a vital member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and He'd had some sex problems, and a little bit above the normal. I mean, he had some deviations in sex, the things that are not socially acceptable, things that you could actually go to jail for, things that are often scorned in society. And he couldn't seem to be free from it. And he couldn't take it to steps 6 and 7. So he became the reformed sex deviant. And like all reformed whatever, he becomes the intolerant person for everybody else. Like this reformed smoker who lectures the people who smoke. He became that guy who would lecture the people in AA that are having sex and aren't married. I mean, everything. He became the real judgmental guy. And the problem with trying to overcome your character defects by self-will is that they are greater than you are. We don't have the power to do that. And so what you do is you keep that character defect suppressed and locked in a closet for a period of time, and you always have a bigger explosion eventually than ever. And that's what he would be, the reformed deviant for years and years and years, not do anything until he couldn't take it, then he'd go on a binge. And then he'd feel just so overly remorseful, and he couldn't take it to God in steps 6 and 7. He was convinced that it was so hideous, this behavior, that he had to fix it. And he couldn't surrender it to God. And when he was about 14 years sober, because of the wonders of the internet, oh Jesus, he hooked up with some sites on there that allowed him to act out some of that behavior. And he would act it out. It was like drinking for him. The excitement going in was great, and he always felt hungover and depressed and remorseful, and he felt like crap on the backside of it. Very much like drinking. And as a result, he got so depressed from that, and he wouldn't tell anybody because he was ashamed that he was doing this stuff again. So he couldn't tell anybody. He couldn't take it to God. He couldn't take it to, I was his sponsor. He wouldn't take it to me. And so he developed a secret life. And he started to become sick of spirit. And finally, a well-meaning doctor in AA who should have known better, at a meeting wrote him a prescription for antidepressants. And the antidepressants took enough of the edge off the depression and remorse he was experiencing from the behavior to allow him to continue the behavior. And then about a year or so later, he calls me up one time and he says, and it just broadsided me. He called me up and he said, I'm going to go on sleeping pills. I said, what? He said, yeah, the doctor says I need them. I said, you don't need sleeping pills. If you can't sleep, it's for a reason. What's going on? No, this is legitimate. It's an adverse reaction to the antidepressants. I said, you're on antidepressants? He said, yeah, I've been on him for a little over a year. I'm his sponsor. He's kept this secret from me. And he keeps it secret because I'm going to start prying. Why are you on antidepressants? You know what I mean? I'm going to start prying. What's going on with you? What's making you do, And he doesn't want to go there. And I said, look, Rob, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't know about antidepressants. But I'm pretty sure alcoholics can't take sleeping pills. And if you're not sleeping, there's a reason for it. And we need to work on whatever that is. No, he's hell-bent. No, the doctor said this is a result of the antidepressants. It's a chemical thing. I need these sleeping pills. And he starts taking the sleeping pills. Now, he's opened the door for chemical help. Not too long after that, he had a heart incident and he had to have some surgery. And standing procedure with those kind of surgeries, you're put on some pain medicine for the operation. As a result of the operation, because they got to cut you. And I've witnessed dozens and dozens of spiritually fit people who are put in that position. Because you're spiritually fit, the medicine goes right to the pain. You get off it right away. You're fine. You don't have to steal your neighbor's TVs or nothing. I mean, you're good. But if you're spiritually sick and you're forced to take that medication, the medication goes to that. It goes to the discomfort emotionally and spiritually. And it did for him. And 3 months later, his brother called me up and he says, you got to come help. They got Rob strapped down in a bed in the intensive care unit of the hospital because he'd been up to 40 Lord tabs a day from 3 different doctors, and plus he was forging scripts. and he was taking 40 a day. And at his age, when they all found out, these things now they're linked by computers. They all found out what he was doing, and all cut him off at the same time. And he's withdrawn from 40 Lortabs a day, and his vitals are so off the charts that they have him in intensive care because they think his blood pressure is like off the charts. And I go into the hospital room, and there he is. He's a mess. And he'd just gotten out of the restraints, and he's laying there, and he's full of remorse and guilt. And he says to me, "This doesn't mean I got to change my sobriety date, does it?" What an idiot, right? Die or be able to claim 14 and a half years of sobriety? Let me see here. So I didn't even address it. I said, let's just get you well and just let's get you clean off this stuff and we'll deal with that later. And he would not change his sobriety date. He tried to keep that in the shade like it never happened. Right? Well, I sort of took him for medical reasons. Not 40 a day. Right? I mean, this is the alcoholic's ability to self-delusion is amazing. I mean, we can extrapolate stuff out of reality that doesn't even exist. I mean, well, doctors gave them to me. Well, you worked those doctors pretty well. So he wouldn't change his sobriety date. I was in a meeting where he took a 17-year cake. I sat there, and 16-year cake. I sat there and they called on me, and all I could say was, well, I just want to congratulate Rob for not drinking alcohol for 16 years. And that was the truth. He hadn't drank alcohol. But he did 2 months later. And he had to. And from the time he was 14 years sober till the time he was almost 17 years sober, when he finally died of this disease, I watched him. It was like, did you ever see that thing, the portrait of Dorian Gray? I watched him physically deteriorate. And the doctors the last year didn't know what was wrong with him. Everything is going wrong with him physically. And they don't understand it. They'd never seen it. It was like everything is just going wrong. His kidneys shut down. He started getting massive migraine headache. Just one thing right after another. And I was sitting about 2 months before he died. I was sitting in a meeting with a guy that I sponsored that had been out of town who hadn't seen Rob in about 2 years. And he leans over to me and he says to me, have you seen Rob lately? And I said, yeah, he's right over there. And the guy looks over, he says, that can't be Rob. And I forgot that this guy hadn't seen him. And he went from a guy who was 50 years old, who coached soccer, who worked out at the gym 6 days a week, a vital specimen of humanity. And by the time he died, within 2 years, he looked like an 80-year-old guy dying of cancer. And nobody knew what was wrong with him. I knew what was wrong with him. His spirit got sick, and his mental faculties in his body just eventually followed. So when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. When we come back, we're going to go through the nuts and bolts of this process, starting with making the list. Why don't we close in our usual manner with the Lord's Prayer. I got a better idea. Let's close with the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build within me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of bondage to self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, and victory over them, to bear witness to those under God, Thy power, Thy love, and Thy name. Bob Darrell, and I am alcoholic. Bottom of page 64. Five lines up from the bottom of the page, we set them on paper, our resentments. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Now that action corresponds to column 1 on page 65, where it says, I'm resentful at. And it uses the examples, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, the wife. So column number 1 is, for the most part, is who. Now it also says institutions or principles, And from my experience, it's mostly people. But you may have a nameless, faceless institution, like in the United States, which is real common, is people who resent the IRS. Because they take in all they're threatening, they're auditing them, or sometimes the army, or sometimes common resentment's the police. But a lot of times, if you look more specifically, it's not really the police that you resent. It's that one or two cops that beat the crap out of you. And alcoholics often have resentments towards police because when we're drunk, we have a habit of counseling them and trying to straighten them out. And they don't like being straightened out. So we have a problem with that sometimes. So column number 1, we make a list. Column number 2 on page 65, it says the cause, and then on the bottom of 64 it says we ask ourselves why we were angry. So column number 1 is who, column number 2 is why. And notice in column number 2, the why column, the cause column on page 65, that it may have 3 answers, but they're brief and to the point. Mr. Brown, why? 1, his attention to my wife. 2, told my wife of his mistress. 3, Brown may get my job at the office. I don't even know Brown. I don't like him just from that. You know what I mean? It just... So, the reason, I think there's a purpose in the reason that gives the descriptions of the causes being precise and to the point. It's a lot of times we get very wordy because some of these resentments we've had on file for years, and we just enhance them and build up all this peripheral stuff around the basic resentment, around the real cause. And all the peripheral stuff is just other reasons to validate ourselves for hating them. I'll give you an example. I had a second grade nun in Catholic school who I resented deeply. And if you would have let me run unleashed, I would have had a whole case built on why I hated her and what she did to my friend Tommy and what she did to my friend Welly and how she hated boys and her vow of celibacy must have made her crazy and on and on and on. But you know what? That's all peripheral stuff that I looked at to just validate my hatred for her. The real reason, the real cause I hated her is that she got me up in front of the class and embarrassed me for not doing my homework, and I felt foolish. And there's nothing worse than public humiliation. And I remember standing, and I hated her from that moment on. And I'm the guy who didn't do the homework. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And then when I got up she asked me in front of the class, and I looked like an idiot. And some of the kids laughed at me because I didn't know what I was supposed to know, and I hated her for that. And all the other stuff. Then from that moment on, I watched her with a scrutiny. And every time she gave another kid a bad time or anything I could find she did wrong was just another page in the file. But the real reason is she embarrassed me in front of the class. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, which is just another way of saying me getting my own way, or my little plans and designs, my ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries, column number 3. Was it our self-esteem, our security? In the 12 by 12, Bill talks about 2 types of security: emotional security and material security. Was it our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relationships which had been interfered with? And then at the bottom of the 3rd column, the 3rd thing up from the bottom is pride. And pride is often something that shows up in inventories as something that was threatened. Now notice that in column number 3, it uses 5 words to talk about column number 3. It says the things that were hurt, the things that were threatened, the things that were injured, the things that were interfered with, or the things that were affected. So we're looking for the things that were hurt, threatened. Next, our injuries, the things that have been interfered with, and then at the top of column number 3 it says affected. And I'll tell you what I've discovered, and I've helped a lot of guys, and I've listened to probably close to 200 of these fifth steps, and I discovered that these different words, it's like circling a thing. You're circling it, and as you circle it, I ask myself, I'm looking at something, what was affected? I don't have a clue. I move over here to a different angle, what was threatened? Okay, I'm seeing it a little bit better. What was interfered with? And each one of these words will let you look at the same thing from a different angle. And sometimes with some resentments, I would ask myself, what was affected? And I don't have a clue. But if I said, what was interfered with? Oh, getting my way. I wanted it to go this way. They interfered with that. And so it helps me to find out the things in myself, the basic instincts. And it's all types of security, sex, or society. Bill talks about the 3 S's in the 12 by 12, the basic instincts. And all the things that it talks about on page 65 are part of those 3 things. My instinct for sex and not to be alone in a relationship. My instinct for security, both emotional security and material security, to feel comfortable and secure. And my instinct for a place in society. What you think of me. How I look. Pride comes in there and strong. I know that a lot of alcoholics at times in their life have felt, and I've felt this, almost as if I'd rather die than be publicly embarrassed. It's a hideous emotion, that public embarrassment. So we're looking at column number 3. What was hurt, threatened, injured, interfered with, or affected. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished with the first 3 columns, we considered it carefully. Now, this is not really the inventory. The first 3 columns are the format by which the real work of step 4 is actually done on the next 2 pages. But it is absolutely necessary. And the inventory process is divided into 2 parts. This first part that we did, we just built our case against all the people that had hurt us. It's almost as if I'm taking the position of the prosecuting attorney. I'm bringing out the case files on all these people and how they screwed with me. And what I'm really doing, without ever realizing it, and I think everybody gets this, is that I'm kind of putting a list together of people that I secretly think owe me an amends. Right? And I got the case, Bill. This is the amends. This is what I should be published on the internet so people can read it and realize how wrong they've been and come flocking to me for begging my forgiveness. This is those people. Okay? That's half of it. Now the book's going to take us in a different course. Now it's going to ask us to start taking the position of the defense attorney and starting to look at it from an entirely different angle, to look at it from their side of the street and get off of the self-centered position. It says the first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong as far as most of us ever got, and the usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Very self-centered. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. And I think that's pretty true for most of us. We look at these things and we only look to see how right we are. I've never tried to look at it to see how I could be wrong in these judgments of people. I always look to reinforce my position. Because if the alcoholic is often referred to as the egomaniac with the inferiority complex. And that's not so much that I think I'm a piece of whale crap, I'm a very special piece of whale crap. And when you're like that, you're the egomaniac with the inferiority complex, is that I have this cosmic tug of war that goes on within me between the ego and the self-esteem. And what I've discovered is all my life I've had this tremendous feelings of inferiority, and I never take actions that allow me to feel better about myself. I always naturally take actions to feed my ego. And what happens is the ego grows up and gets big, and it actually suppresses the self-esteem. Because when you're a big shot, you always secretly know what a piece of crap you are. Right? And I'm always feeding the wrong beast. And it's in Alcoholics Anonymous, especially with good sponsorship and the steps, it's actions that encourage you to actually to back off the ego gratification. Bob, you don't need a new car. You need to go work with a newcomer. You don't need another relationship. You need to fix the one you got. You don't need, and it's just to stop doing the ego gratification. You don't need more attention. You need to be of service, and to start taking the acts that build the self-esteem rather than the ones that build the ego. There's an old American Indian story of this. I think I tell about the young brave and the old man. Did I tell that last night? Okay. I do so many of these, they run together after a while. There's this old Indian story about this young brave who goes to the elder of the tribe, and he says to the elder, he says, I don't understand my life. I'm confused. Sometimes I feel a part of the tribe, and I love everybody in the tribe, and I just wanted to be helpful to the old men and the women, and I just want to be of service, and I really feel connected. I feel that the Great Spirit is moving through me. And then other times I'm so judgmental, and I feel so lost and disconnected, and I'm full of fear, and I worry about everything. And he says, I don't understand this. It's very confusing. And the old man said to him, he said, son, he said, your life is like two dogs trapped in a sack for eternity in mortal combat. And the one dog represents self and fear, and the other represents love and service. And he said, the young boy said, well, my God, which one wins? And he says, whatever one you feed. And I've spent my whole life feeding the wrong dog. Because when I don't feel very good about myself, it never occurs to me to do the actions that Alcoholics Anonymous would suggest. To go down to the Skid Row and try to find some homeless person and help him. Or to go make some more amends. Or to try to do something for somebody else. Or think of it. My natural inclination when I'm having a spiritual bad hair day is to think about me, do for me, fix me, gratify me. And I'm feeding the wrong dog. And no wonder I only ever feel worse, and the hole just gets bigger. It never gets smaller. Never. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Resentful people live futile existences, dreaming the dreams of revenge, and there's no happiness in that kind of life. Resentful people, judgmental people are never happy people. There's a futileness about that. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile, which in itself would be bad enough to waste our life. But it goes on to say it's worse than that. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. Grave like in graveyard. We found that it is fatal, like it's going to kill you. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us to drink is to die. Pretty dramatic stuff. But I'll tell you something, I think they're absolutely right on the money. I don't think Bill's trying to be dramatic. I think he's being honest from our experience. If you've ever had the experience of being sober with a deep-seated resentment, it owns you. You can't pray, really. There's no conscious contact with God when you're in the middle of a resentment. Because you get on your knees and you say, God, please help me, and I wish you'd kind of kill that person slowly. And it bleeds into, it just bleeds right into it owns you. You can't even hear anything in a meeting. If God's trying to talk to me through the people in AA, I ain't hearing nothing if I got a resentment. Because especially if it's a resentment towards someone in the meeting. Because then I sit the whole meeting and I think at them. And if I get to share, I don't share anything productive. I share at at them. You ever share at people you don't like in AA? Try to straighten them out, right? I mean, that's hideous. If there's gods in that room, he ain't there for me. I'm disconnected. I am absolutely shut off from the sunlight of the Spirit. I'm locked up here. And I'll tell you what about me is I don't know how long my fuse is. I don't know how long I can stay up here, locked up in the bondage of self until I just start to hunger and yearn for freedom. And you get me with my emotions putting the screws to me enough, isolated and alone in my own head long enough and depressed long enough, eventually it's going to make a peculiar, insane kind of sense to me that I could once again chance a bottle of whiskey to feel better for instantaneously. And the obsession to drink will return. And if you're an alcoholic of my type, to drink is to die. And it may not mean you will die physically, but everything decent and worthwhile in your life that you've built up will be destroyed. And that is a guarantee. So for me, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholic, these things are poison. It has on this page is 7 death threats. I mean, really, this is a heavy-handed page. It says we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Am I really prepared to look at this? Hopefully, by now I've grown enough or I'm surrendered enough that I would rather be free than be right. And if I get to this point, and I'm still at a point where I still want to be right about these people, I'm not prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. I'm still defended. And I tell you, alcoholics have a hard time admitting we're wrong, that our judgments could be wrong. But the book says you got to be prepared to look at these people from an entirely different angle. It's going to go on to tell me how to do that shortly. It says we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. Another death threat. You know, I'll tell you, this is not dramatic. I'll tell you something that happened to me that I look back and I shudder when I think of it. It was frightening. I was newly sober, and there was a guy in AA who's an old timer. His name was Billy Taylor, and Billy used to reach out to a lot of new guys, and Billy was one of those guys that I try to be like today sometimes. That he would take new guys out to coffee, and they'd sit around coffee shops till early hours of the morning talking about AA. When he was retired, he could do that. And one night in a coffee shop, I'm sitting there after a meeting with Billy, and I found myself, because he was easy to talk to, I found myself sharing some things with Billy that I'd never shared with anybody else except my sponsor in a fifth step. And what I'm talking about is those things that I came to AA with that I was the most ashamed of. The things that I wished nobody would ever find out. The stuff that would make me cringe when I would think about it. And we all have that. We all have stuff like that. And all our stuff is different, but we all have the same sense of shame coming here. And for some of you, it might be that maybe your alcoholism took you to a point where you left your kids alone a lot while you were out partying. Or maybe in fits of rage and hungoverness, maybe you beat your kids. And the memory of their faces when you did that haunted you. Or maybe things you did to your mother and father, and all they ever did was love you, and you know what you did back to them. Or maybe the things you stole from places you've worked and try to justify it by looking at the bad things they did. But you always knew what you were. Or maybe some of the sexual escapades and things you did while drunk or in blackouts that were so inappropriate that when you think about these people, you cringe and you hope you never run into them again. Or you hope they're not talking about you. Or maybe you had sex with something outside your species or something. I don't know. But whatever it is, we all have that stuff. We all come in here with stuff we're ashamed of, to some degree. Whether we let our loved ones down or we did something, we all have that. And I told Billy about some of my stuff, the stuff that I was the most ashamed of it. And he took it fairly well. And he said to me something along the lines of, I'm sure you're not the only one that's ever done that. Someday that might be useful to help somebody else. And I remember him saying that, and it seemed okay. But I'll tell you, there was a part of me in the back of my mind that was a little anxious about this. And I felt like what he was saying was a little bit too much like the A party line. He didn't seem to reject me, and it seemed well. I went home that night. The next couple days, my shift got changed at work, and all of a sudden I'm working the swing shift till midnight every day. And because I was working till midnight every day, I went for a good part of a year where I didn't see Billy because I didn't go to the meetings he went to. And all of a sudden one night, on my night off, I went to a meeting I normally wouldn't go to. And here's Billy across the room, and I hadn't seen him for, 8, 10 months, maybe longer. And it was good to see him because he had been such a vital part of my early sobriety. And I said, Billy, how you doing? And he wouldn't even say hi to me. And he looked kind of through me with a look that was like, get away from me. Like I don't need you. Like you're just like this was the look. And the meeting started, and I sat there, and I'm not hearing nothing in the meeting. I'm hurt. And I know what's going on. I know that he'd been thinking about that stuff I told him. I know. And he's been judging me for it. And I'll tell you, there's a part of me that understood that, because God knows I've judged myself harshly enough for some of that stuff. And I always secretly believed if you knew about me, you would feel about me the way I feel about me. And I'm starting to get angry. And I'm thinking what a hypocrite he is. Trying to act like it didn't bother him. And he's been judging me for that hypocritical son of a gun. And then I had it was almost an epiphany. I started thinking, wait a minute, it's more than that. It's not just that he's judging me. The reason he can't look me in the eye, he's been telling everybody that stuff. And all of a sudden I could see it so clearly. There was a girl that he knows him, and I'd ask her out, and she wouldn't go out with me, and I knew right away. It came so clear. He told her that stuff. There was another guy in AA that ran around with him, and now that I think about it, he was a little distant to me now that I think about it. And I am sitting there in that meeting, and I'll tell you something, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to as soon as this meeting is over, I am going to go and I am going to beat the crap out of him. And the meeting's about over, and the chairman of the meeting says, as they do sometimes in Vegas, they says, anybody have a burning desire before we close the meeting? And Billy raises his hand, and he tells everybody in the room that the tumor he found out that day was malignant, was terminal, and he had a very short period of time to live. And I sat there and I felt this big. And I realized that maybe on the day he found out he was dying, saying hi to Bob was not a big priority. Maybe on the day he found out his life was over, that he was so scared and afraid as I would be, that he was up in his head, consumed with it, and he didn't even know I was there. And I realized that he had never told anybody or never judged me, and it never was about me. And it was like a postcard from God. Dear Bob, you don't know shit. Love, God. So, let me tell you something. When it says in here, the wrongdoings of others fancied or real have the power to actually kill. Let me tell you something. I shudder when I think of this. If I would have gone and beat him up and jumped on him, and then found out later that he never did anything wrong to me, and I beat up the guy who tried to help me on the day he found out he was terminally ill, I'm telling you, I wouldn't have been able to maintain a life in Alcoholics Anonymous. I would have had to die of alcoholism. My fears and guilt and shame would have driven me out here to a bar, and I would have drank myself to death, and I never would have been able to come back here. I never would have been able to come back here. It would have killed me. I think there's a thing that never made sense to me from my childhood until after I was sober a long time and I saw witness of it. The Catholic Church used to talk about mortal sins. And I always resented that, even the concept of it, that there was something that God would judge me so harshly for that He would turn His back on me. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think there are mortal actions that I can take, that God never stops loving me, but I put myself into such a place of separation that I can never take myself off the hook. So I permanently and mortally block myself from His love and grace. It's not Him. I'm the guy who does that. And I think there are actions like that I could take, where I could never